What's up, guys? This is Throne Runner. I know it's been a while since I've made one of these videos, so I'm excited to finally be back and talking deck building with you guys again. I guess part of the reason for my short absence in making these videos has been the crazy, overwhelming amount of successful Lannister decks, and so I felt like it would have been very boring if I would have just done a deck building video about one of the many different Lannister permutations that people have been playing. And I was kind of at a point where I couldn't really find a deck that I was comfortable playing myself. I found that I was really straying away from Greyjoy because of how limited they felt in the current, I guess, state of the meta. But they've had a little bit of a resurgence, and I credit it to the winner of the, I think it was Madrid Regional, and a more recent regional that was held in Vancouver, where we saw some pretty interesting and pretty different, I guess, meta-changing Greyjoy decks that ended up winning those tournaments. So the one that I'm talking about, the first one that caught my eye was the Madrid regional winner. I think his name is Yamoro on Thrones DB. So this deck that I built and took to my latest regional, myself, Rob St. John, and two other friends, we traveled to Pittsburgh for their regional, which Rob ended up winning. I decided to tweak that deck by Yamoro a little bit and play that myself at the Pittsburgh tournament, and I ended up doing pretty well. So this is kind of a deck building / tournament report on that deck. And again, just a heads up, this time isn't completely original on my part. I looked at what Yamoro had. It was very interesting. It had a very solid base, and then I made a couple changes as to what I saw fit. So the deck is a Greyjoy Fealty deck, and if for those of you who are familiar with Yamoro's deck, it is very character light, and at first glance you might wonder how the heck is it possible that he can pull off success with such a character light deck. The standard that we see is decks of 32 or higher in terms of character count, and his deck actually came in at less than 30. It came in at 29, and we're going to kind of talk about why that is and how that deck is successful. And so to save time, I'm going to go over the cards a little bit more quickly, and then we're going to talk about the changes that I made to the deck to suit my playstyle a little bit more. So starting off, we've got 3 copies of Asha, and at this point we know why Asha is important. I've covered her in different deck build videos, and I think for the most part, players should know what she does. If you're a new player, as always, I'll have the card up on the screen for you to quickly look at what she does. So she has stealth, and after you win an unopposed challenge, she stands. This deck is very reliant upon unopposed, so you're hoping to pop that ability off as much as possible. Next, we've got the big guy, Balon Greyjoy, who for a long time was very easily stopped. I felt like so many decks had ways to deal with him. Now there's a lot of characters that have more strength than he does. His ability is that each defending character with lower strength than his does not contribute, and so there are so many ways to boost characters above what Balon has at a base 5, and that was part of the reason why I was having difficulties in finding successes with the Greyjoy decks, because my meta is very target kill heavy, and also there's a lot of Lannister players who are able to drop those big strong characters that make Balon pretty irrelevant on the board. Next, we've got 2 copies of the Drowned Man. This is my favorite 4-drop in the game. Drowned Men get +1 strength for each warship location you control, and you know that Greyjoy has a ton of these locations, so these guys can get pretty hefty pretty quickly. Moving on, we've got 3 copies of Euron. Euron is a great character. He's part of the reason why I stick with Fealty, is because it just makes him that much easier to get out on the board. After he discards a card using Pillage, you're able to take a location out of your opponent's dead pile. So he kind of fuels your economy for you if you get him at the right time in the game, because he's able to not only steal things that work long term like Rose Roads, but he's able to steal the same King's Road over and over and over again. Gaston Greys, you can even take a Winterfell if you feel like being a jerk. And in addition to that, he has all 3 icons and renown, so he helps you get that quick power push. Now, coming in with one of the first changes in the deck that I made is that I added 1 copy of Fish Whiskers. While Fish Whiskers is attacking, if there are more winter plot cards than summer plot cards revealed, each defending character does not contribute its strength to that challenge. This is a very good ability. His price is kind of high at 5. And there's only 1 copy in the deck, but I found him pretty often in the previous tournament. And I would always save him for the first snow of winter turn, because as you can tell, he pops off unopposed just because it's winter. Most of the time, when I play the first snow, I don't think there's ever been a time actually when my opponent has dropped a summer plot on the same turn. It is pretty predictable when you're going to first snow. But I think at this point, there aren't that many summer plots that people play, and not that many that they would play turn 3-ish, turn 2, turn 3, when you would be dropping your first snow. So right now, this card is very strong as we enter into the next cycle that focuses on winter and summer plots. I think that this is going to be a very useful card in that little interim there. So 1 copy of Fish Whiskers. Then we've got 3 Iron Islands Fishmongers, which are just the character reducers out of Greyjoy. Moving forward, 2 copies of Littlefinger. There was a time when I had stopped using Littlefinger in my decks. Yeah, it's nice to get that 2 card draw, and it's nice to get that +1 income, but he at times is a very large momentum hit for certain decks to be playing him in the mid to late stages of the game. You're usually only going to have 5 gold going into marshalling, and having to drop him and then you draw 2 cards which you might not be able to afford does make it very difficult. However, in this deck, because of the amount of saves that you're playing and the fact that 3 of the Greyjoy saves cost 0, and one of the Greyjoy saves, which you have 3 copies of, costs 0, and the other one costs 1. It is very, very nice to have Littlefinger to play and help you find those saves for crucial moments. Not only that, but I tend to go for playing Littlefinger in setup as often as I can and just reaping the benefits of that +1 gold right away. Not only that, but he's also immune to when you play your first snow turn. So you know you're going to have that intrigue icon on the board if you're able to get him out early enough. Moving forward, we've got 3 copies of the Lordsport Shipwright, and for those people who are very, very adamant about playing only 60 cards in the deck versus 61, which this card is, as mine always are, this would be one of the cards that I would drop down to 2 if you're willing to give up on that intrigue icon. However, this is a very, very important card to the deck. Kneel Lordsport Shipwright to choose and kneel a location with printed cost 2 or lower, printed cost 3 or lower instead if you are the first player. The reason why this card is important is because there are a lot of locations in the game that are able to greatly affect the power rush style of Greyjoy, and so if you're able to kneel those cards out before your opponent can use them, such as a Gaston Grey, even a King's Road, if you time it correctly, any of the land reducers, Painted Table needs to kneel in order to steal Power of Immune Dominance. All of those things can be affected by the Lordsport Shipwright if played at the opportune moment and used correctly. So you've always got to remember when you play this card that when you marshal him as your action, your opponent has the ability to kneel one of their reduces, for example, or if we're talking about your opponent having their turn and marshalling first, if they do anything that isn't kneeling that reducer card first, you have an action window, and now you're able to kneel that King's Road before they can use it, or kneel out that Gaston Grey in marshalling, because this is when you have to use it, so they can't bounce back your Balin or Euron, who has 4 or 5 power on it. As important as that ability is, I still don't think that you really require 3 of these guys in the deck. However, like I said, it is nice to have that extra intrigue icon out of Greyjoy. Moving forward, we've got 3 copies of the Salty Navigator. I love this guy, I don't know why. The +1 initiative on this is great. It just helps you get that first player status, especially on like turn one when you're playing things like a noble cause or whatever have you. Having that little +1 there, you'd be surprised how often that edges your opponent out of being first player, and then keeps your cards like Raiding Longship ready to go, or the Iron Fleet Scouts able to boost you by 2 versus just 1. Another change that I made to the deck myself was adding a copy of Sirio. And again, some people might say that Sirio is a tempo hit, coming in at 5 gold. And I think that he's still a very, very important card to have in this deck, even though he does cost 5. You're going to run into a lot of Martell players who are able to strip icons away from your key players. And so having Sirio out on the board is, one, going to make it very difficult for them to get rid of military icons, so that you're still able to pop off things like Seastone Chair, for example, get those easy put to the sword challenges going as well. Not only that, but if you're pushing for the win and you need that extra stealth on a character that has a power icon, Sirio is just there to grant that to that character for you. So he has a lot of uses in this deck. First and foremost, I say that he helps you push through those target kills, but secondly, he is very, very important in getting that power rush going and keeping it consistent throughout the game. So 1 copy of Sirio, and then next we have 1 copy of the Reader as well. After you win an unopposed challenge in which a unique Greyjoy character is participating, either draw 1 card or discard the top 3 cards from each opponent's deck. Please, 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 please. This is a deck that's geared to and primed to win very, very early. So you're going to want to use this ability to draw, not to be discarding cards off the top of your opponent's deck. I mean, it's great when you're able to discard a location and steal it back with your own, but we're not playing for the long game here, so you want to draw cards with the Reader. And again, he is able to withstand first no. He has that needed intrigue icon in Greyjoy, and he's got that power as well. I had a very awesome game where I was able to grant the Reader stealth and go in for an unopposed power challenge for the win, and it's always nice to have that with this guy. And then lastly, our last 2 characters are 2 copies of Theon, who basically has renown whenever he wins an unopposed challenge. He just is able to gain a power for himself. And then lastly, we've got the Wildling Scouts, who are able to be sacrificed to grant stealth to any character on the board. And again, they have the intrigue icon there, so you don't need to always get rid of them right away. I tend to play them, use them in challenges, have them out for a little bit until I actually need the stealth. Don't just go crazy and start granting stealth to guys that don't actually need it on that turn if you can avoid it. If you're pushing for the win, if you need some unopposed challenges, for example, again for a Seastone Chair or for a put to the sword, then that's a great time to do it. But as you saw in one of the videos I posted from the last regional, where we had a player that got rid of his Wildling Scout way too early and pretty much messed up himself on defense because he didn't have that 1 extra character to block an intrigue challenge, for example, then that's how you can, or that pretty much gives you a good example or good reason not to get rid of these characters unless you actually need to do it. And that rounds out the characters at 29. So again, as you can see, it's very, very character light. However, when you're running 3 copies of the key players that you have, and you have so many different ways to save those characters, you find that having 29 in the deck really, really isn't that bad at all. Next, moving on to the attachments, there's 2 copies of Seal of the Hand, which I only got to use once in the tournament. Whenever I put it on, I was pretty much already ahead, or my opponent got rid of it. Excuse me. Or my opponent got rid of it pretty quickly. But I found that it was just there in case you run into that bear matchup. And I did run into the bear matchup round 1 and was able to, I guess, withstand the kneel that he was able to pop off very early on, and so I didn't even end up needing to play a Seal of the Hand. Now, moving on to the locations, and this is the scary part. Nobody really plays Political Disaster, but the day that someone does play it against a deck of this style, I think that it is going to cause a lot of trouble because of how important these locations are to Greyjoy. So we've got the Great Kraken, which after you win an unopposed challenge, either draw 1 card or gain 1 power for your faction, while you control Balin Greyjoy, he gains stealth. Now, this card here is one that you really need to think about when you go into your challenges phase. It's very hard to decide as a Greyjoy player when it is that you want to focus on grabbing power versus when it is that you want to focus on keeping your hand stocked and giving yourself options. Fortunately for me, I usually don't run into that issue. However, I did have one game where if I would have taken a power on one of the unopposed challenges that I got in the earlier stages, I would have likely won the game as I fizzled out at 14 versus drawing that one card. However, the same argument could be made that if I didn't draw that one card, I probably wouldn't have been able to play it to get myself in the position to have 14 power to begin with. So it is very difficult to decide what you should do. My general rule of thumb is that if it's turn 1 or 2, 1, 2, or 3, depending on where I'm at power wise, I do kind of go for the draw, especially if I'm playing against a very intrigue heavy opponent where they're constantly limiting my hand. I go for the draw because I'm looking to find saves, I'm looking to find dupes, which I guess you can consider as a save, looking to find put to the swords, anything that can help me get and establish a good board presence before I go all in on the power rush. So that's 2 copies of the Great Kraken, 2 copies of the Iron Fleet Scout. A lot of people like playing 3 of these because they're great on setup if you're able to find all 3 in setup. Very, very rare, obviously, but even finding 1 and getting that 1 card down for 0 is great. However, I think, yes, this card is very beneficial. It powers up Balin, makes his ability pop off. It powers up the Drowned Men to get them even stronger, and then you're able to kneel it and further increase the strength of the Drowned Men. However, to me, that still doesn't warrant playing 3 copies of this because there are so many other important cards in Greyjoy to play. So I dropped down to 2 copies of this, and that was another major change from the Madrid deck that we were talking about. Next is 3 copies of the Iron Mines. This card is amazing. When a character would be killed, sacrifice Iron Mines to save that character. Obviously, this can be stopped by a timely treachery. However, you have 3 copies of it in your deck. It only costs 1, so you're going to see it a lot, and you're going to be able to pay for it more often than not. Not only that, but this is not limited to only Greyjoy characters or only Ironborn characters or anything like that. This is a card that's able to save any character, and it could even save, I believe, a character on your opponent's side. When a character would be killed, sacrifice Iron Mines to save that character. I guess somebody would argue that you're paying a cost and it has to be your own. I don't know. I think that it can save an opponent's character if you want to save a Benjen maybe. But it's probably getting into jank levels. Who knows? I think it would be pretty cool if you could save an opponent's character and like stop that whole Benjen shenanigan. But I'm not too sure on that. However, chances are you're not going to be worrying about saving your opponent's character. You're only going to be worried about saving your Balins or saving your Eurons from Tears of Lys or other forms of target kill. Miri perhaps, the Mountain perhaps, among other things. So this is a fantastic card to have, and I definitely suggest keeping it at 3 copies. Next, we've got the Raiding Longship. If you're the first player, kneel a Raiding Longship to choose a defending character without attachments. That character does not contribute its strength to this challenge. Pretty straightforward. Sorry, as I said, this deck does like to go first because of cards like this. You want to get unopposed challenges and pretty much blow your opponent out of the game as quickly as you can. 2 copies of the Sea Tower. This maybe some people won't agree with, reducing the amount of character reducers, card reducers in the deck. However, because it's limited and you have King's Roads, you have Rose Roads, and Euron's ability to steal King's Roads and Rose Roads, I feel that you don't actually need 3 copies of the Sea Tower in your deck. Again, yeah, it's nice and set up, but again, like I said before, it is limited, so you can only play 1 limited card, and thus you might as well get rid of the one that only focuses on Greyjoy characters versus getting out any character such as a Rose Road or a King's Road. So that's my reasoning behind only playing 2. And then 3 copies of King's Road, 3 copies of Rose Road, standard. Next is the Seastone Chair. Now, in my Store Championship version of Greyjoy Fealty, I believe I only played 2 copies of Seastone Chair. I went up from 1. I played 3 this tournament, and I feel like going forward, I'm definitely going to continue to play 3. I saw my Sea Stone chairs every game. I think it was a 6-round tournament. I made it into top 8, so I saw it in all 7 games that I played. And in 6 of the 7, I saw it either in setup or turn 1, and I was able to pop it off at least once. At least once every game, save for the very last game when my opponent was able to treachery it. Target kill is target kill. There's not really much else that you can say about it. It's very, very strong, especially when you pair it with a put to the sword, or on a turn where your opponent thinks they're safe by playing a Calm of Westeros, such as turn 1 to be safe on a very weak setup. For example, instead of playing your March to the Wall and getting rid of it early, you can still power through that Calm over Westeros by using Sea Stone Chair because it replaces the claim. So some people still might argue that 3 copies is too much. The fact that the character can't have an attachment on it, you likely need to go first to get it off. They know what's coming once you play it. All these reasons, I still feel like you need to have 3 copies of this in your deck because of those prominent, very, very strong, very, very annoying 7 drops and 6 drops that each faction has. Miri being the one that's most highlighted in my mind. The Mountain, Nymeria, Tyene, etc., etc. The list goes on. So those are the locations, only 20 versus the 22 in the Madrid deck. And then finally we have the events, and here is where I made even more changes to his deck, again to suit my playstyle. So 2 copies of Put to the Sword is pretty standard. Oops, that's Put to the Torch. We all know what it does. Win a military challenge by 5 or more, and you're able to target kill one of your opponent's characters. Risen from the Sea, which only saves Greyjoy characters, but it gets attached to that character after you save them to give them +1 strength. I strongly advise against using this on Balin if I strongly advise against using this on Balin if Balin is either not duped, or you don't have an Iron Mines or another Risen from the Sea to back it up. Because if your opponent plays Risen from the Sea and you've already chosen Balin as your character that's being saved, and they cancel this event a la Bran or Hand's Judgment, Balin is dead. So make sure you have some kind of contingency plan for if the Risen doesn't actually pop off. Unless you 100% have to choose Balin for whatever reason, I suggest that you save an Iron Islands Fishmonger, or Theon over Asha, or some other character that's not one of the linchpins of your deck. Just some advice. Next, a key change that I made was adding copies of the Kraken's Grasp. Play only if you are the first player. Choose a defending character with strength 5 or lower. That character does not contribute its strength to this challenge. Why is this important? Not only is it great for when you're turning on that power rush and you want to make sure you're getting unopposed challenges for Great Kraken, for Theon's ability, for Ash's ability, etc. This just makes it all the more easier to pop off that Sea Stone Chair, to pop off that Put to the Sword, because it costs 0. You're able to save your gold for the Put to the Sword, and then again, you're not worried about having so much stealth on the board because you know that you're able to take out an additional character. It just has so many uses, and I think that it's a card that you don't necessarily need 3 copies of. There's going to be times that you're not first player and that immediately shuts this card off, but it's always a great card to have when you're going for the win, or if you need to push through an early target kill. So I don't know how he made it through without playing this card. For those decks that had those big characters that are very scary and able to disrupt your game plan, and your opponent's just blocking with chuds to make sure that you're not getting unopposed, I think this is a fantastic card to have and a fantastic addition to the deck. Lastly, we do not sow. Where the heck is it? We do not sow. And I said, if you are one of those people that likes to play 60 cards to get rid of the Lord's Port Shipwright, this would also be a card that I would consider dropping down to 2 copies. A lot of people are going to have some backlash to that comment and say that, this is a bad idea because of cards like Winterfell in the meta now. Winterfell Castle, again, Gaston Grey, Painted Table, any other annoying location in the game. We do not always able to take that out if you win an unopposed challenge. It's also able to get rid of annoying attachments that are turning off your Seastone chair, that are turning off your raiding longship, etc. However, I still found that many games I drew this card, multiple copies of it, and it just sat in my hand. And I mean, some people argue that, you know, it's nice to have this in your hand just in case your opponent plays a Seal of the Hand, or in case your opponent drops a Widow's Wail, whatever have you. However, I still feel like if it's a card that's sitting in your hand the majority of the matches that you play, because you have 3 copies of it, drop it down to 2 and put in something else that might be useful. Like another character, perhaps, if that's the route that you want to take. I, throughout the day, wish that I had a 3rd copy of Theon, so that might be one of the routes that you would like to go. Unless your meta is very Stark heavy, I don't think that it's absolutely necessary to have 3 copies of We Do Not Sow. Like I said, I've seen on Reddit and I've seen in the AGoT group that people say that this is now a must-have 3 of. I still don't necessarily agree with that. I think I would have done equally as well if I only had the 2, and that was in a tournament that saw, I can't even remember how many Starks, but also a lot of Beras, and so there was a lot of painted tables out there, and a great deal of Martells as well, and I was able to get past most of them. A lot of the time the confiscation was enough, in my opinion. So yeah, that rounds out the deck at 61 cards. Now we're going to talk about the plots. The plots I kept pretty similar to what was already there. So that was 1 copy of A Noble Cause, 1 copy of Calling the Banners, like I said, 1 confiscation, March to the Wall. Where is it? March to the Wall, First Snow of Winter. Sorry. The First Snow of Winter. And Wildfire. So, and I know that's 6. I'm going to talk about the 7th in a second. So, Noble Cause, reduce the cost of the first Lord or Lady character you marshal this round by 2. So, Balin, Euron, Asha, Theon, the Reader are all targets for this card. Calling the Banners, amazing card in this deck to have. Yes, you do have Wildfire, and yes, you do have the target kill, but a lot of the times you don't really care about certain characters that your opponent has on the board. You're gonna leave them alive because Balin's gonna be able to stealth one and get by the others on his strength alone, and the ones that he can't get by for whatever reason, or even if he's not on the board, you still have the Kraken's Grasp to help you get through those. Not only that, but it has 6 initiative on it, so you're going to be first player more often than not. Confiscation is like an auto include in every deck. If you're not playing Confiscation, you crazy, man, you crazy. March to the Wall, because after first snow turns, they're usually not going to have too much left, and you just march one of them and you're golden. Obviously Wildfire, we know what that does, but the last and major change that I made is the Rise of the Kraken. So he played Rise of the Kraken, and the deck that won Vancouver also played Rise of the Kraken. And even though I saw this in these tournament winning decks, I still don't agree on playing this card. This is one that I deliberated on the entire 5-hour drive to Pittsburgh, and then to our hotel the Friday night, and then at the hotel, and then in the morning the 1.5-hour drive to our venue, and then while writing out the deck list, I finally decided that I'm just not going to go with it. Yes, the Kraken's Grasp is great. It's a 2/8/2. However, your opponent usually knows when you're going to play it, and they'll drop their 9 and beat you out. Not only that, but if you're not able to get the unopposed challenge, then it's like you're playing a blank 2 gold plot, which sucks. The 2 claim again is great if you're able to get off the military or whatever have you. However, the card that I still stick by and stuck by in Store Champs is a Clash of Kings. So you're getting 2 more gold, you're getting an extra 1 initiative. Yes, the claim drops by 1, but on a power challenge it might as well be claim 2. People argue, well, what if you don't get, you're missing out because unopposed will get you blah blah blah. Yeah, that's fantastic when you're already winning for the most part. In all the games that I played on Saturday, there was only one game where I was like, man, I wish I had Rise of the Kraken. And After saying that, I realized that if I had played Rise versus playing a Clash of Kings, I still would have lost that game. The game where I got to 14 power, I still would have lost that game because the challenges that I made to get myself to 14 were all because of the extra 2 gold that I had from playing Clash the turn prior. So regardless if it was of Rise of the Kraken or Clash, I still would have lost. Even the game that I lost in the top 8 when I played Clash, it wouldn't have made a difference because I wasn't going to get an unopposed challenge that game as well. So in my opinion, Clash is still that win more card, or the card that you play just because you know that you're going to lose type of thing. I still think that Clash is much better. Example, round 6, I was 5-1. Sorry, 4. Math is so hard right now. I'm so tired. I wasn't 5-1. I was 4-1. 4-1. My opponent, I believe, was also 4-1. And because the ID rule is stupid, we just decided to go for it. If I win the game, I go 5-1. I'm auto in. If I lose, the only person that I lost to that day was Brad Iyer, aka Yeezus, and my strength of schedule would have been pretty good, and so I thought I would get in at 4-2 anyways. That game was a very, very hard fought game in round 6. It came down to the last 3 minutes. I played a Clash of Kings because there was, and thinking about it, there was no way in hell I would get an unopposed challenge if my opponent didn't make any mistakes. So he saw the Clash of Kings, he saw that we had 3 minutes left, and he went in on his challenges. I believe he started with the intrigue first, then went to military, and then he made what every Clash of Kings player hopes to happen, is the mistake of going in with a chud power challenge just to get me to kneel out a character. I believe he went in with 2 strength, and I said a power challenge of 2. He agreed. I quickly blocked with, I think it was who did I block with? I blocked with some bum. It might have been Fish Whiskers to win it 3-2. So I said, I win. He says, yes. I said, reaction. I take a power for Clash of Kings because it works on defense. That put me to 13. And then I got rid of a Wildling Scout, gave the Reader stealth past the Hound for the unopposed victory. So, I mean, I don't think that would have happened had I played Rise of the Kraken that turn. I don't think he would have done that. Things would have been a lot different. And like I said, the Clash of Kings actually worked out for me way, way better all day than Rise of the Kraken did. If you disagree, I totally understand. And I mean, all it takes is for you to put Rise of the Kraken in your deck versus this one, because you don't necessarily have to agree with me. But I do think that Clash of Kings is the way to go. You can never go wrong with having an extra 2 gold. You can never go wrong in a deck like this with having the extra initiative, because it keeps your cards turned on, such as such as the Kraken's Grasp, as well as the raiding longships. So again, this is the deck. I know this video is a lot quicker than most. Some people might enjoy that, some people might not. But just a quick 2-3 minutes of strategy. Don't be alarmed if, and I'm about to sneeze or burp, I think. Excuse me. Don't be alarmed if in your setups you only have 1 character, or sometimes even less than a character. In those rounds, the 6 games that I played, I recorded them on my phone. Let me just quickly check those for you so I don't lie. The 6 games that I played were: round 1, I played against a Barra Greyjoy. Round 2, a Martel Dragon. 3, Lanny Dragon, which was the game against Yeezus, aka Brad Air. I played against a Lanny Wolf, and 3 Target Lions. And I think in the game against Brad, I set up 0 characters, if I'm not mistaken. And in the game in top 8, I set up, I think, a single one. Yes, I set up 1 character and I got marched turn 1. Like I said, don't be alarmed if that's your setup, because chances are that means that you've set up great cards like the Great Kraken, a couple Iron Fleet Scouts maybe, an Iron Mines, a Raiding Longship, whatever have you. And that turn 1, when you play that Noble Cause, especially because the meta is so heavy on decks that play Trading with the Pentoshi, you're able to get a lot of cards out turn 1 to defend yourself, and not only defend but also start your power rush off very, very early, because you have saves. So having those saves saves you, pun intended, from basically having shitty starts. You're not worried about that military claim usually, or that target kill on your important character that you played beside a Chud character, because you're able to save it. So that really changes the way that your opponent has to play. Not only that, but it gets them to show their hand early. And what I mean by that is they're going to be playing those put to the swords early because they think that you might not have a save in your hand, or they think that you have no way of basically getting around it. You can't cancel the Tears of Lease or whatever have you, because they tend to forget that your save is either free out of your hand or it's already on the table. And so they need a treachery or they need a hand's judgment to cancel those things. So even if they are able to cancel it, again, that's a lot of cards that they're getting rid of in order to kill that one character of yours. So I found that in those games where I had the very character light setups, I was able to come back very well, win a couple. The 2 games I lost, I got to 14 power against Brad after a 0 character setup. And that all hinged on me having to go in for an intrigue challenge with Euron, knowing that he had, or having a good idea that he had a put to the sword in hand based on how he was defending. And I missed the put to the sword. He then got his challenges, put to the sword on Euron, and got rid of 4 power just like that in a game that I would have won the very next turn. And then similarly in the top 8 against Brad's buddy James Booker, who you guys might remember from the Theon and Asha scandalous setup from the Michigan Regional, I believe that was. I also would have won that game had it not been for a treachery that he played on my Iron Fleet Scout to boost Balin out of range of a Dracarys after he played Crown of Gold on an Asha. So he had a lot of things go his way in order to win that game. The Crown of Gold, the treachery, and the Dracarys all in one turn basically sealed the game for him. Otherwise I would have won again that turn off of 1 character setup where he marched that 1 character away right away. So this is a very strong deck. Unfortunately, I had some unlucky moments in both of those 2 games that I lost, but otherwise I think that this is a deck that's very capable of handling all the current powerhouses in the meta. Like I said, I played a lot of Lanny Dragons. I withstood 3 games where Miri was set up, and I withstood a game where Nymeria was set up and Tywin came in shortly after. I was able to win all of those. So again, this is a very great deck. I'm super excited that Greyjoy finally has something that's able to remain competitive against those style of decks, and I look forward to improving on this and looking at those ideas that were so successful in the Vancouver tournament. So if you haven't looked at the Vancouver deck as well, I suggest you do that. I'm going to make sure that I post my deck, the deck that I brought to Pittsburgh that got me into top 8, as well as the original deck, because I like that one too. And I mean, you guys can probably look at that and see which changes you prefer versus if you like the original or if you like the changes that I put in, just to kind of get Greyjoy players thinking a little bit so that we can keep this success rolling. So yeah, look forward to the top 8 matches posted from the Pittsburgh Regional. I didn't record any of mine. I recorded a couple of Brad, I think James as well, and then the Rob St. John victory match as well. He finally got the regional, and I like to say that I contributed to that somehow. So I got a piece of that win that you got, Rob. Congrats again, and everybody, peace out, take care. Hope you enjoy the deck. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see y'all when I see y'all. Peace.